I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today with me I have one of my favourite of the crop of small SUVs, the Toyota CHR. Now, I like this little truck because it looks really distinctive in a field of vehicles that can tend to look a little bit samey. However, I can understand if this design doesn't work for everybody. Let me know down in the comments whether or not you like Toyota's smallest crossover. But there are some other reasons why this is a good vehicle. It's got a nice powertrain, a small turbo engine under the bonnet, though you certainly won't suspect it of being quick. Handles well, it's decently sized, although there are one or two little packaging issues that we will see when we jump inside the CHR. But this is a really important segment for Toyota to be playing in. Small SUVs are really where it's at the moment as people start to move up and out of hatchbacks and into a vehicle that is, you know, technically a crossover, technically an SUV, even if you wouldn't exactly call that a lot of ground clearance. Now, this particular CHR is actually a bit of extra fun because we have the manual gearbox inside, as you'll see in a second, but we've also got a few other notable things to have a look at in the cabin of this little vehicle. Now, this is actually one of the best Toyotas that you can buy at the moment, and there's a reason for that, and that's because this was actually designed specifically for Toyota Europe. The CHR is not a vehicle that's sold in every Toyota market. It was developed for areas of the world that have slightly higher expectations of their vehicles, and Toyota Australia only really signed on at the last minute for this vehicle. So the interior is beautiful. Now, the layout won't be for everybody, but it is made very nicely. All the materials feel a cut above basically anything else Toyota makes at the moment, from the creamy leather on the wheel and the shifter to the vast swathes of soft surfaces that cover basically everything you touch. This is one of the nicest of the mainstream small SUV crop to sit in, and that's a good thing. And speaking of sitting, you also have these really nice, supportive, sporty fabric seats. Now, if you go for the higher Cobra grade, as it's called here in Australia, you get heated leather seats, but these ones are pretty nice, and fabric works very well on hot days, and we have a lot of those here in Australia. Now, looking further afield, you only get this little touchscreen up here, but you do get standard navigation, Bluetooth audio. There's no Apple CarPlay and Android Auto in this vehicle, sadly, at least not here in Australia. But you do get a clear color screen ahead of this nice little steering wheel that basically tells you everything that you need to know. Good clear gauges as well. I actually quite like the design of the dash generally. Not everyone's going to like this screen sort of thing that sticks out up here. Plus, it's pretty ghetto that the USB port has to dangle down from the top of the dash, but you can't have it all. What you can have though is decent practicality. You have two big cup holders here between the seats in different positions, a nice deep space here under this armrest, and also a further tray ahead of all of that stuff, and decent sized door bins that you can fit a big water bottle in. But what about the space in the back? Not everything can be perfect, even in a good car, and the Toyota CHR leaves a little bit wanting for backseat space. Well, actually, that's kind of incorrect because space isn't too bad. As you can see for me back here, as a 6-footer, I've got just enough headroom and legroom's okay. The issue is, my God, the huge amount of black trim over here that basically blocks most of your view out. Next to you, you just have this little porthole of a window here, and that's going to make people, especially children, feel a bit claustrophobic in the back of a CHR. I'm okay because my head is tall enough to see out this tiny little jailhouse window, but if you've got a small kid back here, they're not going to love it. They're also not going to love the fact that there aren't air vents in the back, there's not a USB port in the back, and there's also not a flip down armrest, at least not in this standard CHR grade. Plus those plastics that were so nice up front get a bit hard back here. So for me, I see this car as really being for a couple. Maybe you'll put people back here ever so often, or a pet, but it's not really a backseat I'd want to use all the time. Thankfully, for Toyota that is, things get better around the back because the boot is very respectable. The hatch is 177 litres of space back there, which is highly competitive for this class. It's about 100 litres bigger than a Mazda CX-3, for example. There's not too much of a load lip, just a little one. I can slide out the small Chasing Cars suitcase. the shape is good, and there are a few features that you'd expect on the European market. Remember, this was designed for that, like shopping bag hooks. That's nice to see. Overall, it's actually a pretty practical vehicle for carrying stuff. Just close the hatch relatively easily. Bit heavier than some other competitors, but all in all, pretty livable for a small SUV.
So, what's the Toyota CHR like to drive? Well, I don't just like the way this little SUV looks, I also love the dynamics, and I don't often say that about cars that sit in this small SUV class. I generally think that if you're looking at one of these small SUVs, you're almost always better off to get the hatchback in the range that they're often based on. Something like a Mazda 3 instead of a CX-3, or maybe a Volkswagen Golf instead of a Tiguan. There's now quite a big size difference between those two cars. But the Toyota CHR is so good, and even though the Toyota Corolla is now also a very accomplished car, this CHR is better. And if I was choosing between the two of them, I would actually go for the CHR, and I'm going to lay out why that's the case. The first reason is actually the handling. Until recently, it would have been just so surprising to say that a Toyota handled with verve and vigor, although that's increasingly becoming less surprising. And we know that's because Mr. Akio Toyoda took over control of the company some years ago, and he himself races, is very interested in vehicle dynamics, and he decreed that the company not make a further boring car. And since that point, we've had the 86, which was a personal project of Akio's. We've had the new Prius, which, although it has a pretty pedestrian mission in life, it actually has really nice chassis balance. We've had the new Camry, which is a very good car. We've had the new Corolla, and we've had this, the CHR. They're all embodied with a sense of really good handling, good ride, and that shines through very clearly in this particular vehicle. So we've got really good steering. It's fast, it's direct, the front end feels glued to the steering wheel. It goes exactly where you expect it to go. And it's also really light, which means that despite the fact we don't have particularly special tyres fitted on this one, it never seems to be overtaxing its rubber. It's always happy to go where you tell it, even if you're really pushing on a back road. The CHR actually loves back roads. It corners extremely flatly. There's very little body roll, and this is a beautiful momentum car. Reminds me of the same sort of characteristics as an 86. It isn't very fast, but it loves corners, and it rewards you for driving it pretty hard at times. And the reason that you have to do that is that there's not a huge amount of engine in this SUV. So unusually for Toyota, it has a 4-cylinder turbo, but a very small one. It's 1.2 litres in displacement, and it only makes 85 kilowatts of power and 185 newton meters of torque. So those figures are pretty low. Now, you don't have to rev it much in order to generate them, which means it isn't as bad as it could be, but certainly the CHR is not about to be mistaken for a rapid vehicle, and you do have to ensure that you keep it on the boil. Now, the best way to do that is to get this particular one that I'm driving here. This is just a standard CHR, and it has the 6-speed manual gearbox. Fabulous little manual. Wish this manual came on more grades of the Corolla, for example, but unfortunately you can only get a stripper Corolla with a manual here in Australia. But this CHR manual is actually really well equipped. It's got a really nice interior. It's got almost all of the safety stuff, so you don't feel like you're driving a crappy base model. You actually do feel like you're driving a more up-spec car. And with this lovely, light, easy 6-speed manual, you really can extract as much performance as possible out of the 1.2 turbo. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still not a huge amount of performance, but it's better than it otherwise would be in the CVT. CVT is okay, and of course most people get the CHR with the CVT, nothing wrong with it. But the manual is so much more engaging and more fun, and it actually has rev match downshifts, which is fascinating, which means it's very easy to drive, even if you're only just now coming to manual gearboxes, so it's not like it's hard to pick up or anything like that. The ride quality, oh my goodness, Toyota have nailed the ride in the CHR as well. It's firm and relatively sporty, but it's still extremely compliant, so you never feel uncomfortable. Instead, it just glides across imperfections in the road. It's very nice. You do feel the road surface and you can tell what's going on underneath the car. But as I say, it's absolutely not off-putting, and this is one of the best riding small SUVs that I've tested. It all feels very balanced. It's got a nice chassis underneath. You can tell it's quiet, it's refined, and it's fun to drive. I mean, what more could you want? Sure, if you're looking for more power, there are other options out there. Something like the Hyundai Kona with its 1.6 litre turbo is an option, and in fact, an engine like that would be awesome in the Toyota CHR, because you can feel that with a little bit more performance, this thing would be a real goer. And in future, I'd love to see a CHR GR, because we know that Toyota are working on a GR or Gazoo racing version of the Corolla, their first hot hatch in a very long time. But I actually reckon the CHR would be very entertaining as a GR as well. Maybe, we'll see. In terms of the other stuff, as I said, this is a quiet car. It's relaxing to drive, and it's also safe. So Toyota are, making a commitment to putting their safety sense package on more cars, and this CHR standard grade has most of it. So we've got AEB and forward collision warning. We have adaptive cruise control at some speeds, at sort of the middle speeds, and we have lane departure warning. If you go for the Cobra, which is the up-spec CHR, you get access to stuff like all-speed, active cruise control, and steering intervention for the lane departure warning too.
So, those are my impressions of the Toyota CHR. Nice little SUV this. It's pretty good value, it's very good to drive, it's comfortable to sit in, up front at least, and if you can forgive the backseat for being a little bit claustrophobic, then this may well be the urban crossover for you. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe down below and press that notification bell so you never miss one of our highly detailed Australian video car reviews. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think of the Toyota CHR or any requests for the channel, and make sure you share this video with your friends. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.